Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. There is no such thing as a free meal, so you now have to listen to us for just a little bit. I'm Eric Kaler. It's my honor and privilege to serve as president of Case Western Reserve University and to welcome you here this morning as we begin the celebration of our 200th year as an institution. I was asked to explain why we're doing this on a Saturday morning in 2026. Well, we're doing it because 200 years ago, February the 7th was actually a Tuesday, and that was a full day of business for the Ohio Assembly, who on that day signed the incorporation papers for Western Reserve Academy in Hudson, Ohio, and began the journey that we're celebrating today. So that's why we're here on a Saturday. They did not have the foresight to calculate that 200 years from that day would be a Saturday, else they might have done it on Monday. So we've had quite a journey. Our enrollment has grown roughly 250,000% from about a handful of undergraduate students in 1826 to now nearly 12,500 undergraduate and graduate students at Case Western Reserve University today. Our first students learned from a tutor. Faculty meetings were quite compact affairs in those days. Today, our faculty-student ratio, though, is still about 9-to-1, still pretty good. Our name has taken a few twists and turns, but always with an eye to honoring the two institutions of our past, Western Reserve College and the Case School of Applied Science. But the one thing that makes us most proud as an institution is our impact, who we are and who we will continue to be, which is truly a force for career-defining education and life-changing research and cures for disease. So this morning, we're honored to begin our celebration with the people in this room, and I want to acknowledge just a few of them. First, we welcome Emeritus Trustee Russ Warren. We also welcome John Olifo, who's a member of the university's Neighborhood Advisory Council and executive director of one of our community partners, Famicas. Gary Broadbent is here, president of the Alumni Association Board. And finally, a special welcome to our friends and board members from our original home, now Western Reserve Academy in Hudson. They are Dagmar Fellows, Cliff Hood, who will join our panel discussion in just a few minutes, and Tony Winchell-Boris, who is also the James A. Jewell, M.D. Professor of Genetics in the Department of Genetics and Genome Science at our School of Medicine, and a pediatric geneticist at University Hospitals, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. So, Tony, welcome. Thank you all for being with us today. So, we have prepared a brief bicentennial video that walks you through some of the highlights from our history, and I'd like to show that to you now, please.
Every great institution is built on stories. Tales of dreams, challenges, and triumphs. At Case Western Reserve University, these stories have fueled 2 centuries of innovation and discovery. As we commemorate our bicentennial, we honor the legacy that has shaped us and look forward to writing new chapters of progress and impact. Our story begins with 2 pioneering institutions, each with unique tales, rich with tradition and innovation. Western Reserve College, established in 1826, embraced a foundation of liberal arts, scientific inquiry, and public service. Case School of Applied Science, founded in 1880, focused on applying scientific principles to solve real-world challenges. Together, they rewrote the narrative of higher education. In 1967, the Federation of Case and Western Reserve formed a bold new chapter. They tore down fences, built bridges, and redefined the possibilities of collaboration. Their legacy thrives in every corner of our campus. Tales of transformative achievements.
I'm a double alum of Case Western Reserve University, very proud of it.
I was very fortunate to achieve my goal and my dream, in large part because of Case Western Reserve University.
Groundbreaking discoveries, and visionary trailblazers.
I've given to Case every year since I graduated in 1937.
Education is everybody's path to a better future.
You have the drive and the skills and the knowledge to succeed. You came from Case Western Reserve University, and you should be damn proud of it.
If I have been able to help change the landscape of America, it is because of the legal education I received at this university.
Today, our stories of impact continue. We are strengthening our commitment to research, gaining recognition as a leader in cancer advancements, engineering solutions, and bringing innovations to market at an unprecedented pace. The future holds even greater promise as we deepen the convergence of STEM with the humanities and design immersive learning experiences to prepare tomorrow's leaders. As we celebrate this bicentennial milestone, we invite you to help write our future, where challenges are embraced and new ideas come to life for the century ahead and beyond.
It is a nice story. So this morning, we're very pleased to be able to welcome a bicentennial birthday panel, which includes a team of experts on our university's history. So please come forward, the panelists. They are Dick Basnick, Helen Conger, John Grabowski, and Cliff Hood. So welcome each of you. Please take a chair and we'll get started. Very good. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming out this morning to be with us. I'm looking very forward to the history lesson about our great institution. And so maybe we could begin by asking each of you to give a minute or so of your background and in what brings you here today. And Dick, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Dick Basnick. I've been associated with the university since May of 1968. Not quite a full year after the Federation. Served in a variety of administrative roles, and I've also taught at several points in my stay here. I have, pertinent to this event, I'm the author of the most recent history of the university, which came out in 2014. I've been asked many, many times why we didn't save that until now. The best answer I have is that back when I completed it, I was still, well, at least was working on it. I was still in my 60s. Now I'm in my 80s. So it worked better then. Anyway, it is a fascinating story with many twists and turns, as Eric has said. And I'm very happy that we're celebrating it.
Terrific. Thank you. Helen, please.
Hi, I'm Helen Conger. I'm University Archivist here for CWRU. I started here working at the university in 1983, and after, I'm also a CWRU alum, graduate studies 1989 in History and Archives Administration. And so in 1989, I transferred and began working in the university archives. So, and the history of this university is fascinating, and it's a great place to be. So.
Terrific. Thank you.
I'm John Grabowski. I have been on this campus since 1967. I'm still waiting to graduate. But seriously, I came here as an undergraduate, did my master's, did my PhD here, and then worked at the Western Reserve Historical Society, continued to teach here. For a long time, I was the Krieger Mueller Associate Professor of History. I retired from that, but I didn't quite retire because I'm now an associate, basically a visiting associate professor of history at the university and still working at the Historical Society. This has been most of my life on this campus, and it's been a really good life.
Terrific. Thank you, John. Cliff, please.
I'm Clifton Hood. I'm a professor emeritus of history at Hobart and William Smith Colleges in upstate New York, where I specialized in American urban history. I graduated from Western Reserve Academy in 1972, and I've been a trustee there for the past 12 years. And by the way, I want to thank you and everybody here for inviting Reserve to be part of this celebration. We have a long joint history together, and it's great that this celebration is going together jointly. I retired to Cleveland last year. You don't hear that very often, I know. And I moved to Little Italy. I work out at 1-to-1 on your campus, and my church, the Church of the Covenant, is right next door. So I'll consider myself an honorary person at CWRU. Though I'm wearing green.
You are wearing patriotic green, and we consider you an honorary member
Thank
of our
you.
community too. So welcome to retire to Cleveland, and thank you for being part of this ceremony. You and others have thanked us for including you. I point out that without you, we would be like 130, so it's way less impressive than being 200. So thank you for starting us off. And Cliff, let's start with you. At the beginning. So tell us why the founders of Western Reserve chose Hudson, and give us a sense of what those early days on campus were like.
Sure. Hudson was accessible. It had good transportation. In the 1820s, the Ohio Canal was being built just 5 miles to the west. There was a good stage line road that went through town. It also was thought to have a good moral influence. Most of the settlers in Hudson were from Connecticut, and since this college was largely designed to train ministers, that was really, really important. So 60 years later, a village would look like it was Old Hat, and Cleveland would look promising, but it was the reverse in the 1820s. But the key selling point was, no surprise, money. David Hudson, the founder of the village and its most prominent citizen, offered $2,000 and 160 acres of land if the college would locate in Hudson. And so the deal was sealed. Early on, the Connecticut influence was strong. The buildings were patterned after old buildings at Yale. Most of the early faculty came from Yale as well. And so you can see, I'm just curious, how many of you have been to the original campus in Hudson? Okay, that's really great. If you haven't, I think it's beautiful. I have been lucky to teach and study at some great campuses, but WRA takes my breath away. So we'd be happy to welcome you back. There were some notable occasions that took place at early Western Reserve College. John Sykes Fayette was recruited by a pastor in New York City and graduated from the college here as the first African-American graduate in 1836. 3 years later, in 1839, Samuel Harrison became the first graduate of the preparatory division, though he didn't go on to study at the college. There were several Native American students who studied here before the Civil War, and after Japan reopened itself to the West, there were two enterprising Japanese women who came to study here. Early on, the overriding conflict was slavery. The New England cultural inheritance meant that the Western Reserve region was solidly anti-slavery. But there were different varieties of anti-slavery. The one that we're most familiar with today is probably abolitionism. Abolitionism grew out of the Second Great Awakening wave of religious revivals. Abolitionists held that slavery was a sin. It was an abomination. It had to be killed. There could be no compromise with it. Oberlin College, which figures in this story, was strongly abolitionist. It was a more complicated story in Hudson. There were abolitionists among the students and among some faculty members as well. The president, George Pierce, and several leading trustees, including David Hudson, subscribed to a more conservative form of anti-slavery. The anti-slavery issue continues. It heats up with the Mexican War of 1848, which brought territory in the Union that would go either slave or free. And then with the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850, which inflames the entire North. In this context, two student literary societies, strongly abolitionist, propose to President Pierce that they have as their commencement speaker Frederick Douglass. Pierce is very wary of this, in part because they are more this conservative breed, but largely because he's concerned about the damage to the college and its reputation. Because this is a hot topic, people pro and con, in ways we don't realize it today. But Pierce is in a tough bind. The Hudson campus is down to 160 students, which compares to 370 at the same time in Oberlin. The college is having trouble paying the debt on the new buildings it's constructed, like the chapel in North Hall. And Pierce is aware that if he says no to the students, they will in all likelihood decamp to Oberlin. And that could mean the loss of 10%, 20% of the student body. That could be a really serious blow. And so he reluctantly has them go ahead. It has to be said that Frederick Douglass is the embodiment of the myth of the self-made American. He's born into slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland. He teaches himself to read and write. He escapes to New Bedford in Rhode Island. He then goes to Rochester. He becomes the editor of the North Star magazine, a leading abolitionist magazine. He is an eloquent orator and writer. And this from a person who didn't know to read and write except he taught himself. He comes to Hudson. He gives a 2-hour-long commencement address in which he argues for black equality and dignity. That may sound like obvious to us today, but what he is doing is going up against the leading lights of his day, learned scholars with all sorts of appointments at Harvard and Yale, who believe that white people are biologically superior and they use that to justify slavery. And Douglass eviscerates their arguments. The mere presence of a black man on that stage is powerful. And so what I would say is we may have backed into that moment, but this is something in our joint history that we can be really proud of. This is one of the greatest moments in our collective history. And I know that both our institutions are honoring it, and we are using, you use history to think about the future. At a time like this in American history, that's always going on, it is right and proper and important that we do this and continue doing this.
Great, thank you so much, Cliff. So Dick, let me turn to you. You've written the definitive history on the university, albeit perhaps a few years too early, but that's okay. So can you talk about who and why the college moved to Cleveland?
Sure. First of all, I would say that Cliff was very kind, and when he gave the reasons for the location in Hudson, he skipped one. Cleveland at that point was a lake port, still is, and it was reportedly filled with drunken sailors. Thank you for admitting that. And there was concern among the founders that that would not be the environment in which they wanted to place their young students. The reason that the college moved to Cleveland, first of all, he did mention the growth in population in Cleveland since the founding of the college. Cleveland was clearly going to be the centerpiece of this region. But a person up in Cleveland named Amasa Stone had his fingerprints all over this. Mr. Stone was a railroad baron in the full sense of that. He owned companies that owned train lines, built rails, built bridges, etc. And in 1876, a train operated by his company was driving over a bridge built by his company near Ashtabula, which had rails and structure on the bridge built by another of his companies. Basically, the bridge collapsed, and with huge loss of life. And there was an investigation by the state, which wound up blaming him and his companies. He prior to that time had been, how to say this, he had been the main mover and shaker in Cleveland. Very wealthy man, involved in all sorts of activities and companies and so forth. He was somewhat crushed by this. His reputation was in the toilet. And meanwhile, a gentleman named Leonard Case Jr., also in Cleveland, was making plans to create a trust that would be used to found a school of applied science, but with the condition that the trust could not be announced or acted on until he died. He died in 1880, and the trustees of that trust began immediately to form the new School of Applied Science. Stone saw an opportunity to gain some points in terms of reputation in Cleveland by causing the college to move from Hudson to Cleveland, because Cleveland at that point, clearly the dominant city in the region, still had no college. And so he pledged $500,000 toward the move of, or they called it the removal of the college from Hudson to Cleveland. He went further than that. He was a controlling personality. And he determined that, or one of the conditions that he set for this gift and the move of the college was that the college should sit on land adjacent to the new campus of the Case School of Applied Science, which at that point was still operating out of the Case family homestead on Public Square in Cleveland. It had only been founded in the fall of 1880. Secondly, he demanded that he be allowed to appoint the majority of the trustees at the college when it moved up to Cleveland. And he had some other requirements as well, but he demanded that the community of Cleveland provide the land for the two campuses to be adjacent. And the community did that. They came up with about 41 acres of land, which is about the central part of the current Case Western Reserve University campus, bounded by Euclid and Martin Luther King and a Delbert Road and the railroad tracks. So the two schools then had to figure out how to divide this land. The thinking was it ought to be divided about equally. Now, in 1880, this was farmland, orchards and farmland out here. There was a bar roadhouse over at 105th in Euclid. It wasn't 105th, and it wasn't Euclid at that point. But there wasn't much else out here. And when people from Cleveland came out to this area, it was most often by the train that came out here, the transit. And by the way, University Circle is named that because there was a circular track that allowed the train to turn around out in front of what many of you will recall as Howard Johnson's, and is now has a different name for a wonderful new apartment building, and turn around and go back downtown. So people coming out here were looking eastward, and both institutions wanted their buildings to face eastward, to be seen. But they had to figure out which institution got which part of the land. Now, Stone was well known to be a kind of a bully. So the trustees who were working on this for the Case School of Applied Science basically said, we demand to have the easternmost, we have to have the easternmost part of the property, the part that is now along Adelbert Road. Stone said, absolutely not. You have to take the westernmost. The Case trustees said, oh, okay. We give in. Making Case the institution people would see first when coming out from downtown Cleveland, which is where everybody came from at that point. Anyway, the move here was not easy. In 1880, you didn't have SUVs or moving vans and so forth to haul things. They had to move a whole library, one of the best libraries of any college at that time. They had to move students' belongings, faculty offices, et cetera. So it was a real parade to get the institution up here. The institution, I will say this, at the time of the dedication of what is now Adelbert Hall, the main building, then the main building for Western Reserve College here, and still the main administration building for the university, when that was being dedicated in the fall of 1882, there were two speakers, the presidents of Johns Hopkins University and Cornell University. This is 1882 now. Both of them in their separate long speeches, all speeches at that point were long, Cliff, suggested strongly that the two institutions, Case hadn't moved there yet, of course, and Western Reserve had just moved there, that the two institutions somehow figure out a way to get together. Their language was pretty strong and urgent, and they decided not to do it. So, but that's how early the conversations began. I'll pick that thread up later when we talk about some other things. Thank you.
Yes, universities, as you know, operate on 85-year time cycles, so it took them 85 years to agree. But Cliff, briefly as a footnote to that, I can't imagine that was well-received news in Hudson.
People were not happy. They worried about the blow to the village's economy and its reputation. Angriest of all, perhaps, was a woman named Aller Baldwin, 82 years old, the daughter of David Hudson, the wife of a trustee and prominent benefactor, and the mother-in-law of the principal of the preparatory division. She demanded that the college return paintings of her father and husband, And she also threatened legal action if the college didn't return a plot of land that she had given the college, and was smart enough to say that in the deed of trust that this had to be used for a college in perpetuity. The trustees did the smart thing. The college agreed to pay a subvention of $3,000 a year to the academy. That was for the makeup, to continue the makeup of the care of the buildings. I think that was a bone to Hudson. But also the idea was that the grammar school would continue to funnel students to the college now in Cleveland. And I think the reason why we did not go with you to Cleveland was that the high schools here were thought to be better. But it turns out that that subvention lasts until 1900. I think we just pled poverty. And by the way, the graduates were going to Eastern colleges. But it ends in 1900. The academy closes its door in 1903. For a history we're doing, I've looked at some photographs of what the campus looked like in those years, and it's very spooky. The buildings are falling apart. I was saying to Karen, it's not a place that you'd want to be Halloween night. But to the rescue comes a man named James Ellsworth, who was a native of Hudson, who had made millions in the bituminous coal fields of western Pennsylvania. He secures the title to the campus from the college. He pays for the repair of old buildings, and he erects a new academic building, Seymour Hall, that is still the main academic building on our campus and that we just renovated a few years ago. In his will, he leaves a bequest to the Academy of $4.8 million, which is equal to about $88 million today. So, the Academy would survive, but the question was, what kind of school would it be? Secondary education is in flux in these years. The high schools are just being invented. And so this is open for debate. Would it be a high school, a quasi-public high school? Would it be dedicated to vocational training? James Ellsworth was very big on vocational training. Oh, by the way, I should say it reopened its doors in 1916. The answer to this question comes in 1921 when the decision is made to model the school on elite New England prep schools like Choate and Exeter. There is one significant complication. They are all single sex, they're all male, and the academy was coeducational. And so the decision is made to do away with coeducation, to do away with women's education, and it remains that way until the fall of 1972. And I know that date very well, as do my classmates, because we graduated in June and females arrived in September. Not the best timing from our standpoint, but the academy is up and flourishing.
Thank you, Cliff. I'm just going to keep going. There's a lot to be said. John, let me turn to you. There's a long-standing relationship between American universities and American cities. I like to say there is no great American city that doesn't have a great research university in it, and that's our job for Cleveland. But talk a little bit about how the university shaped the city of Cleveland and vice versa.
Yeah, well, in many ways, it impacted Cleveland. One, it provided Cleveland with a first-class university. But if we're looking at graduates from Case Western Reserve University, you'll find them all through the business and the sort of, I would call, the technological world in Cleveland and elsewhere. It reshaped Cleveland because I think it made this area University Circle, and it literally made it University Circle because this would not be. So my thought is, if Case Western Reserve weren't here, if it hadn't merged or come here, what would we call this? Well, Jephthah Homer Wade had created Wade Park in 1872, and that was one of the attractants, so maybe this would be Wade Park. So we literally gave a name to that. But this seeded something that happened beyond. So if we're looking at university hospitals, if we're looking toward Cleveland Clinic, we're looking at, it really seeds Euclid Avenue as the med ed corridor that it is now. I think that's the major thing it's done. But it also has very interesting things in recreation in Cleveland. Once upon a time, when Case School of Applied Science played Western Reserve College, Western Reserve University in football in the 1930s, that was the biggest football game in the community. And it packed in crowds, so that was one thing. The other thing, it always gave the city bragging rights because the university, and it gives the city huge bragging rights now, given the rise of the university. But, you know, from my perspective, it really also anchored everything else in University Circle. Now, dare I say, the other next major organization to come to University Circle did it just in the 1890s, and it was the Western Reserve Historical Society, where I also work. And they located out on an area now, which is basically where the new apartment building is. And so that starts a whole cascade of cultural institutions coming into this area. The Art Museum, the Natural History Museum will eventually move there. It's very late. And you're looking at basically the whole structure of Euclid Avenue changes because of that. So it's the seed that builds University Circle, and University Circle now is I think one of the preeminent spots in not only the city but in the nation. You can't find anything else like this anyplace else. So it all starts with getting out of Hudson, yep, and coming here and staking out and then allowing change. We can talk about the merger sometimes if we want to, but that's should I do that now?
No, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that in a minute.
I want to give Helen a chance to build on that seed analogy. Tell us a little bit about how that seed grew, how the campus has evolved, and a little bit of the history after that.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. One thing that I'll start with is kind of parallels University Circle is downtown. Case School of Applied Science wasn't the only university school or college downtown. The School of Medicine was established downtown in 1843 and was there until 1924. So, 80 years. And then there were several other schools. The dental school started downtown, our old School of Pharmacy, which no longer exists, our two short-lived affiliations with the Conservatory of Music and the School of Art, which are now CIA and CIM, and then Cleveland College, right when the School of Medicine is moving to University Circle. And it's a whole story in and of itself. The planning with Lakeside Hospital, as University Hospitals was known at the time, planning really that move to create the new academic medical center. But then Case and Reserve came together and established Cleveland College. And Cleveland College was established downtown because that's where everything was. And it was for adult learners, credit and non-credit classes, part-time, full-time, daytime, night classes, you name it. And that's where very many Clevelanders attended college. And that was the last of the university schools to move to University Circle, which was around 1954. So we had a presence downtown for a very, very long time. But the development of campus here is fun. Dick talked about the original split, the west side being for Case and the east side for Reserve. And Case built out their campus. Case Main was on the spot of the Michelson Morley Fountain. And everything proceeded from there, and they built straight down the middle, the old chemical laboratory, the old mechanical laboratory. Before, as they grew exponentially, then they went to the one side where Rockefeller Physics is and the A.W. Smith building is, think about that. And then at the far end, Bingham was built behind the first mechanical laboratory, but it was also for mechanical engineering. And the Warner building and the Rockefeller Mining and Metallurgy was up closer to there, but now on the cliff, on the top of the cliff. And over time, what Case did, then when they had a huge building program in the 50s and 60s, they actually built into the cliff, because that being on the top of that bluff there where Dome Brook was at the bottom, going, and it was that was not covered until the late 1930s, where you got that culvert, and we made arrangements with the city of Cleveland for use of some of that land. But those buildings were built into the cliff. And it's kind of funny now because I watched some of the excavation for the ISEB, and they just cut the cliff away. I mean, they weren't even trying to do engineering things and figure out how do we build into this cliff. And that's why the first floor is down at the parking lot 1, and the third floor is campus level. And people have commented about why are the back sides there? Because with the buildings down the strip with A.W. Smith and Rockefeller and Strosacker, they were facing into the quad. They were facing, that was the campus, and it was the same with Olin, Glennon, White, Sears, and so on. They were facing toward the campus. That was their campus and their quad. And Reserve just grew exponentially almost right away after the, John mentioned it, after the move. We originally, it had been co-ed when it moved actually here to Cleveland. And then in 1888, President Hayden kicked the women out of Adelbert College, but closed that to women, and they went away from co-education to coordinated education. So the College for Women in Mather was built. But so that's when and Jephthah Wade II is the one who donated the land for the Mather Quad, the Mather campus. So that was built separately. It's hard to envision the Adelbert campus now because it is so changed. But they had a regular, they called it the Adelbert Walk, and Morley, which is still standing but not used, the old biology building, which is now DeGrace. There was physics and the gym and so on, but that was Adelbert. It's really, really hard to imagine. But a big change was moving the medical school. And then we basically kind of took over that block. But it's so quite interesting.
A lot of evolution.
And we didn't even get into housing, that could take an hour to talk about housing.
Yes, and at the pace we're going, guys, we're behind. So I'm going to combine a couple of questions and ask Dick and John to briefly talk a little bit about the Federation years, the early Federation years. You were both students here. Then maybe just a quick history of the lead up to the Federation, and then what it was really like to be on campus during those early transition years. Dick, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, as I said earlier, the first conversations about getting the two schools together started in 1882. In the 19-teens, the then mayor of Cleveland said, gee, what would be a good idea if you got together? Didn't. In the late teens, the presidents of the two schools said, we ought to think about getting together, and they formed committees from both schools, joint committees, and they went at it tooth and nail for a while, didn't get anywhere, and then by 1923, the Cleveland Foundation, in one of its first major forays into community issues, put together a commission, a national blue ribbon commission, to come up with a recommendation for the enlarged university. Make a long story short, they published a very lengthy report with recommendations, but the only one of the recommendations that came to pass was the joint effort by the two schools to create Cleveland College. And we talked a little bit about Cleveland College. It was an extraordinary opportunity for Clevelanders to get an advanced education near where they worked. At that time, most people worked downtown. Not true anymore. That came out of that, and then in the about 1960 or so, the presidents of Case and Western Reserve started having some conversations, because the two schools had been sharing a number of things: calendars, bookstore, library, etc. They ran up against a reality of the bureaucracy of the federal government. I probably, it's not true, but it's an interesting story. About the time the zip codes came to be, we're now 44106. Prior to the zip codes coming in, if the National Science Foundation got a proposal from a faculty member at Case, he or she was coming from an address on Euclid Avenue, and if they got a proposal from someone from Western Reserve, he or she was coming from a Delbert Road. Now they were both in the 6 zip code, not zip code, but code for Cleveland. But unless that person at the NSF had been out here, he or she didn't know that these two institutions were cheek by jowl, and that the pieces of equipment that they were both asking for, pretty much identical equipment, would be sitting 80 yards apart. The two institutions began talking seriously because they were getting pushback from the feds. And it's not entirely because of the zip codes, but they put together, the two institutions put together a commission known as the Heald Commission, which was charged with coming up with recommendations for increasing the collaboration between the two schools. And the Heald Commission did a lot of work. It turned out they didn't really do a plan. What they did is they gathered a lot of information, which was useful. And then the two institutions said, let's do it. And the target date was July 1st of 1967. I can talk just for a moment about what it was like being a staff person hired here in 1968, May of 68. And John can talk about what it was like being a student at that point. From my vantage point as a staff person, as director of the publications office, which was charged with putting together a catalog for the university, it was pandemonium. Because the two schools had different course numbers, different prerequisites for courses that had the same title, et cetera. And a person on the staff in the publications office whose job was to put this book together was going crazy. And I asked if I could help. She said, well, take a stack of papers and see what you can make of it. So I took a stack of papers. It happened to be the Department of Economics. So I went through it, and then I called the chairman of the Department of Economics, and I asked, could I talk with you? And he said, well, about what? And I said, your submission for the catalog. And he said, I submitted that 3 months ago. I can't be held responsible for that. I mean, it's 3 months, this is a catalog that was supposed to last a year. But they hadn't thought through how to list prerequisites, how to present a curriculum. And that's just one little example of what I'm sure students went through.
Well, it's I appeared on this campus in September of 1967, and it's interesting because my guidance counselor at South High School in Cleveland said, you ought to apply to Yale, and there had been no collegiate experience in my family at all, and I just wanted to stay in Cleveland, so I applied to both Case and Western Reserve, and I was accepted by both Case and Western Reserve University. And by the time I got here, so I had to make a choice. There were two curricula. And I liked chemistry. I guess I liked chemistry because I liked blowing things up when I was a teenager. But I was enamored with history and liberal arts. And when I looked at the catalogs, I could get good chemistry classes at Western Reserve as well as at Case, but Western Reserve had a better liberal arts program, and so I chose Western Reserve and stayed there, and I ended up being a historian rather than a chemist. Can I tell one quick story here? I had a calculus teacher first semester, Marlo Scholander, a brilliant man. I couldn't understand what he was trying to teach me. I got a C. Next semester, there was a new semester and a new prof, and I understood everything clearly. 2 weeks later, Dr. Scholander walked back in. He said, "I'm taking the class over," and I immediately after that class went to the registrar's office in Adelbert Hall and changed my major to history. I went home, was living at home with my mother, and she said, "John, what did you do at school today?" And I said, "Well, I changed my major to history." She said, "What the hell are you going to do with that?" But I ended up studying with David Van Tassel and some wonderful historians. I have ended up crafting a career that basically fits me, and that's why I like listening to this history here. But yeah, it was crazy. If you were a student here, the football team was playing, they had to schedule 3 years in advance. So students were parading saying, if we win, we lose. If we lose, we win. There's some other posters that I can't tell you about at all that they had. It was absolutely bizarre. One of the first things I did was went to the bookstore, and they still had Western Reserve University stickers for your automobile, and I picked a couple of those up because I figured I'm sticking those on my car, they're going to last. So I've been on the Western Reserve side for most of my life. But yeah, it was a really crazy time, and if you throw in what was going on in Cleveland, Huff and Glenville in 66 and 68, if you're looking at Vietnam, if you're looking at May 4th, those are all the years that I was here, and I watched this university struggle with some of those issues, but survive from it. And the university is an incredible place, having come out of the 1960s with its flag flying.
Great, thank you. So we're drawing near the end now, and we have one question from the audience that I want to be sure to get to. So we're going to do a little lightning round here, right? So in 1 minute or less, I want each of you to tell me, imagine you're at a dinner party and you want to share an interesting fact about the university or its history. We'll start with you, Cliff. What would you tell somebody?
This comes from former President Carol Cutler's history of the college. The first building that went up on the Hudson campus, Middle College, long since demolished, had its front door that faced east, back to Yale, back to New England. Every other building that went up under the auspices of the college, the chapel, North Hall, President's House, and the Athenaeum, had its front door facing west. And in American history, west is the direction of the future.
Very good. Helen, 1 minute. What story would you tell?
Well, on campus in 1968, the university decided to move one of its dormitories, Claude Foster Hall, which was located between Twing and Severance Hall. And so they picked it up, moved it 200 yards down Euclid Avenue, turned it 90 degrees, and parked it between Twing and Mather House. And then 4 years later, they closed it. And then 6 years after that, they raised it. So it's just this funny story about we picked up and moved the dorm, and the students were living in the dorm when they did it, and they just moved it down the street a little bit. Yeah.
How can we do that again? So Dick, how about you? Interesting fact.
Someone has to mention the gargoyle. There's a gargoyle on the west wall of Amos Stone Chapel. The other three sides have smiling cherubims. The legend is that this was an expression of disgust by the trustees of Western Reserve toward Leonard Case because he was an atheist. He was in fact a Presbyterian, just like they were. And the gargoyle was placed there by the architect, who had never been to this campus, never been to Cleveland, and it's a copy of a British or English church. and it was common in England at that time to put a gargoyle on the west wall. So no, there is no legend to be honored there at all.
That's quite a disappointment. I like telling people that story. I'll have to make up a new one now. John, bring us home. One story.
I go home by going to the Armory, which is the Delbert College gym. And that fascinates me because it was built during World War I when students here were marching and getting ready, doing for service. But if you go through that gym, which has its own history, and you go to the back, you find another one. If you go to the very back, there's the earliest gymnasium you'll ever see in this campus. I think it dates back to the 1880s.
Yeah, 1888.
1888. And the last time I was in it, it's been a while, there's a running track above. And you could do 50 laps and you won't do a mile because it's a small track. But it takes you back to the history of physical education. Right from that gym from 1917 back to the 1880s. And I think that's a really good historical spot.
So we'll close with a question from the audience, and it reads, I clearly recall a visit of former President Dwight D. Eisenhower to the Case campus around 1961 or later. He participated in a small panel discussion in Tomlinson Hall. Do you have any background on the nature of his visit? And Helen, I think you would be best to answer that.
Yeah, that was called the Night with Ike, and they were having a special night. He was the guest to honor. And that is actually when the Ford Foundation president, Henry Heald, of the Heald Commission a few years later, presented, and I believe it was an $8 million check to Case Institute, and which was really a game changer for them. And it provided millions of dollars for faculty, hiring new faculty salaries, really pumping up graduate education, expanding money for postdocs, for research, purchase of equipment, and so on. It was a big game changer. But before the big event, he met with students before and after that. So yes, it was in November of '61. So yeah, that would be memorable for a student to meet the former president of the United States. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the hour. I think we're going to transition now magically. I think this wall is going to go up, if I understand the run of show correctly, and there'll be a public reception and party next door with a variety of kinds of entertainment that lasts into the afternoon. So please join me in a round of applause and thanks to our panelists. And I wish you all a very enjoyable afternoon and a very enjoyable birthday year of our 200th bicentennial. Thank you all for coming.